It's really hard to follow Heather in that talk, but we're going to now take that really wide regional perspective and global perspective, and then remember those connections as I go through about the green turtle population around Aldabra. So good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and a privilege, so thank you. And when Aldabra, it's impossible to not be astounded by the amount of turtles in the water. I mean, you have juveniles, adult males, adult females, they're everywhere. It's an absolute gold mine of turtles. But it wasn't always that case. And green turtles reached dangerously low numbers from exploitation, mostly for international demand. And metal pots for making calipe were commonly found around the atoll. But the highest exploitation was felt around Settlement Beach. There was even a green turtle pound at Pas Femme, which is really close to settlement, to hold more turtles for when the ship came. And up to 12,000 females were permitted to be taken in the early 1900s, which, can you imagine that many annually? So it's not surprising that by the 1960s, very few crawls could be found. So national and international warnings of this really, really stark decrease, with huge influence from turtle specialists, fisheries advisors, and conservationists, including Harold Hirth, led to complete protection of green turtles at Aldabra in 1968. Yeah! And through the Royal Society expedition in the 1960s, Jack Fraser, I hope he's listening today, started making more detailed observations of breeding and in-water turtles at Aldabra, and he's maintained a really long-term interest in them. Now, track surveys began in the late 1960s through Hirth, through Fraser and Gibson, and in 1980, a standardized track count survey was initiated by Jean Mortimer. And, okay, good. And it continues to this day by Seychelles Islands Foundation, as was mentioned. And that's a really long time. It makes it the longest continually protected and monitored population of nesting green turtles in the West Indian Ocean. It's just so impressive. Now, due to turtles being long-lived and possibly taking decades to reach sexual maturity, it's really necessary to have these long-term data sets to capture trends. It's good timing. Dun, 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 dun. So what are the trends? Okay, by simply leaving the turtles alone and protecting their habitat, Aldabra green turtles have become an incredible conservation success story, thanks to all the people who have put all this effort into it. And this is similar to other green turtle populations around the world who have had similar protective measurements. Now, when we look at the most recent publication, it captures those trends by Pritchard et al. And on the x-axis is years, so it's 1980 to 2019. And the y-axis is an estimated number of clutches. But basically, what's important is you're able to see this increase. It's 173% total increase in the number of estimated clutches. You're impressed by that? Hold on. What about Settlement Beach, which was the most heavily exploited? Same graph, just different scale on the y-axis. And it's even more pronounced. So this is an incredible increase. Now, remember I said track started in the 1960s, and when you look from the 1960s to 2019 for the whole atoll, it's a approximately 400 to over 600% increase in total number of clutches. So that's very, very incredible. It's also shown the importance of Aldabra within the Western Indian Ocean. It's one of the largest breeding rookeries. And there are still a lot of questions, though, aren't there? So I'm attempting some of these questions with my PhD research through University of Pisa, with Seychelles Islands Foundation, and Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission by using a number of exciting technologies and methods. So satellite telemetry, some of which was talked about earlier, satellite telemetry, stable isotopes, and unmanned aerial vehicle surveys. Yes, that's me being so frustrated that there's another warning on the drone. So first, turtles nest multiple times in one breeding season, and recent work in the Chagos by Nicole Esteban and co-authors showed that the breeding green turtle population there was likely overestimated by a factor of 2. That's massive, isn't it? And that was shown using GPS satellite tags versus looking at by foot patrol. So in January, we deployed GPS satellite tags on 3 females nesting for the first time in the season to see if this was also the case at Aldabra. And so far, they've nested a similar amount of times as those in the Chagos. So that's indicating that we're likely overestimating the number of individuals that are coming to breed at the atoll. And that's really important for population assessments. We're also getting really cool glimpses of their internesting movements. But where do they go when they leave the atoll? We know that's really important to know. Or how many foraging grounds are contributing to the Aldabra population? Well, there are some people in this room who actually deployed those satellite tags. About a decade ago, 6 females were fitted with GPS satellite tags. And as you can see, they went all over, just like the turtles in the Chagos. And to expand our sample size, we'll use stable isotope analysis on skin tissue samples of nesting females. And this is basically an inferential way of tracking an animal. And it's not as precise as satellite telemetry, but it does allow us to get a much bigger sample size. I mentioned juveniles earlier, didn't I? Well, what about them? There's a long-term juvenile data set for captures, mostly inside of the lagoon, and this was started back in the 1980s, also by Gene Mortimer. And they're caught by walking on non-reef patches at low tide. Francis is sneaking up on one. Or from a boat at high tide. They're measured, flipper tagged, and this will allow us to look at size, class composition, growth rates, and also survival. Now, as growth and health are strongly influenced by food, we're investigating foraging ecology of juvenile turtles. So by collecting potential food items and a skin tissue sample from juvenile turtles, we should be able to infer what they're mostly foraging on. And gaining these insights will help us to understand what's important to them and how they respond to changes in their environments in the future. Last, we're using those UAVs to do initial surveys on abundance and distribution of megafauna, particularly turtles within the West Lagoon. Now, it's a really exciting time for turtles on Aldabra. It has been. We have this incredible increase and are able to start asking other questions. But it's an incredible time for turtles in the West Indian Ocean, as was talked about. There are a few really, really cool collaborations going on that help us understand within the wider context of the West Indian Ocean. And I'll just mention a few. The Indian Ocean sea turtles, please see their poster. The STORM project, which is pairing turtle movements with meteorological data. And further resolution into genetic connectivity, which has been looked at with the adults and they're looking further into it, Dr. Michael Jensen with the juveniles. So all this effort, both locally at Aldabra and internationally, and the continuation of these long-term data sets, it will only allow us to make better conservation decisions for this species. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you to the Royal Society. Thank you to SIF very much. And also a Flipper 5 to the Aldabra team for helping me just finish all this work, because it's all a huge team effort. So thank you very much, everyone.